What if Deep Cover, 1992, wasn't just a crime thriller? It once exposed a world of undercover deals, blurred loyalties, and silent corruption. But 34 years later, the real story is even darker because behind the breakout roles came quiet disappearances and unseen battles. Stay with us as we uncover what really happened. Laurence Fishburne as Russell Stevens Jr./John Hull. Laurence Fishburne was born on July 30th, 1961, in Augusta, Georgia. At 31 years old, he played Russell Stevens Jr./John Hull, the undercover narcotics officer pulled so deep into corruption that his identity begins to fracture in Deep Cover. The performance became the film's moral backbone, grounding its violence in psychological consequence rather than spectacle. That inner fracture reflected a life shaped by absence and pressure from an early age. After his parents' divorce, Fishburne was raised in Brooklyn by his mother, Hattie Bell Fishburne, a school teacher whose long hours left little room for emotional shelter. His father, a juvenile corrections officer, creating a quiet instability that pushed Fishburne toward self-discipline and early independence. Acting offered structure, first on stage and later in Apocalypse Now. That early intensity followed him into adulthood and shaped his career trajectory. Roles in Boys and the Hood, and later The Matrix, turned him into a symbol of authority. But the control audiences admired was built on years of emotional containment. Fishburne learned to command space on screen because he learned early how to survive without reassurance. Marriage exposed the cost of that armor. His first marriage to Hajna O. Moss produced 2 children, but collapsed as work consumed his time and energy. A second marriage to actress Gina Torres carried hope and mutual respect, yet distance and prolonged separation eroded the bond, ending quietly in divorce in 2018. Today, Laurence Fishburne is 65 years old, continuing to work selectively as an actor and producer. With an estimated net worth of around $30 million, he has shifted from proving himself to preserving control, turning a life marked by absence into one defined by authority and endurance. Jeff Goldblum as David Jason. Jeff Goldblum was born on October 22, 1952, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. At 40 years old, he played David Jason, the eloquent, morally elastic attorney orbiting the drug underworld, in Deep Cover. His performance sharpened the film's irony, showing how intelligence and charm can quietly enable corruption. That unsettling balance traced back to a childhood interrupted by loss. Goldblum grew up in a structured household until his older brother, Rick Goldblum, died suddenly at 23 while traveling abroad. The shock fractured the family's sense of safety and left Goldblum with a lasting awareness that stability could vanish without warning. Acting and music became his anchors, carrying that tension into early roles and later into The Fly. Grief reshaped his temperament rather than derailing him. Goldblum developed a restless curiosity and a need for constant motion, traits that fed both his eccentric screen presence and his jazz musicianship. Success followed in large-scale projects like Jurassic Park, but the energy behind those performances was rooted in an unresolved awareness of loss. His personal relationships mirrored that instability. Marriages to Patricia Gall and later Gina Davis ended under emotional strain and competing careers, leaving behind disappointment rather than scandal. Only later did he find steadiness with Emily Livingston, whom he married in 2014, becoming a father at an age when many peers were slowing down. Now, Jeff Goldblum is 74 years old, remaining active across film, television, and music while performing regularly with his jazz ensemble. With an estimated net worth of about $40 million, his life reflects delayed balance, an artist who turned early loss into longevity rather than collapse. Charles Martin Smith as Gerald Carver. Charles Martin Smith was born on October 30th, 1953, in Van Nuys, California. At 39 years old, he played Gerald Carver, the cautious, morally conflicted intelligence handler operating inside a corrupt system, in Deep Cover. His restrained performance added a layer of bureaucratic realism, showing how damage is often enabled not by villains, but by hesitation. That quiet restraint was shaped early. Smith grew up in California in a household influenced by art rather than instability. His father was a professional animator, and years spent moving between creative environments taught Smith adaptability, but also uncertainty about financial security. Discovering acting through a school play gave him purpose, yet choosing an unpredictable career path introduced early tension that followed him into roles like American Graffiti and later Never Cry Wolf. As adulthood settled in, Smith's career remained respected but uneven, alternating between memorable performances and long stretches out of the spotlight. That instability echoed in his marriage to Ursula Martin, which ended in divorce and left him raising one child while navigating professional transitions. Smith has not faced a defining public illness, yet Never Cry Wolf took a psychological toll, requiring years of solitary filming under extreme conditions. The experience reshaped him, pulling his focus away from acting toward directing, where control and authorship offered relief from the vulnerability he felt in front of the camera. Today, Charles Martin Smith is 73 years old, continuing to work primarily as a director, dividing his time between North America and Europe. With an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million, his legacy rests not on stardom, but longevity. Victoria Dillard as Betty McCutcheon. Victoria Dillard was born on September 20th, 1967, in New York City. At 25 years old, she played Betty McCutcheon, a woman caught between loyalty and moral reckoning in deep cover. Her presence brought emotional grounding to a film dominated by power struggles, reminding viewers of the personal cost behind institutional corruption. That emotional clarity grew from a disciplined upbringing rather than chaos. Raised in New York's multicultural environment, Dillard trained from early childhood with the Dance Theater of Harlem, learning control, endurance, and bodily precision long before entering film. The transition from dance to acting opened doors, but also exposed her to an industry shaped by racial and gender barriers, pressures that followed her into early projects like Ricochet and later television success on Spin City. Her personal life intertwined closely with her work. Dillard was in a relationship with Laurence Fishburne after meeting on Deep Cover. The separation coincided with growing professional strain, as the demands of television and the limits placed on women of color narrowed her opportunities. A deeper turning point arrived in 2006, when Dillard was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 39. The diagnosis forced a reevaluation of pace, ambition, and visibility. Gradually, she stepped back from acting, redirecting her energy toward advocacy and public education, transforming personal illness into collective purpose. In 2026, Victoria Dillard is 59 years old, living in New York, and working as an advocate for Parkinson's research and awareness. With an estimated net worth of about $2 million, her legacy extends beyond performance, defined instead by resilience, restraint, and the choice to turn private struggle into public service. Gregory Sierra as Felix Barbosa. Gregory Sierra was born on January 25, 1937, in Manhattan, New York. At 55 years old, he played Felix Barbosa, the ruthless drug trafficker operating with quiet menace, in Deep Cover. His performance added a hard, lived-in credibility to the criminal world of the film, making danger feel casual rather than theatrical. That sense of survival was forged early. Abandoned by his parents, Sierra was raised by an aunt in Spanish Harlem, growing up in an environment where neglect and instability were part of daily life. He learned resilience the hard way, developing the guarded toughness that later defined both his screen presence. Acting became a way out, first on stage and later in films like The Towering Inferno, where he brought authenticity rather than polish. His career thrived in television, where audiences recognized him as Julio Fuentes on Sanford and Son and Detective Sergeant Chano Amengual on Barney Miller. These roles reflected his own background, allowing him to stand out without ever being a headline star. Sierra's private life carried heavier wounds. He married Eileen DeFelitta, a union that ended in divorce, then married Susan Pollock in 1976. 2 years later, Pollock died by suicide, a loss that devastated Sierra and left a lasting mark on his later years. He eventually found steadier companionship with his third wife, Helene Tabor, who remained with him until the end of his life. Sadly, Gregory Sierra died on January 4, 2021, at the age of 83, after a prolonged battle with stomach and liver cancer, passing away in Laguna Woods, California. With an estimated net worth of around $2 million, his legacy rests in decades of relentless work. Clarence Williams III as Taft. Clarence Williams III was born on August 21, 1939, in New York City. At 53 years old, he played Taft, a morally anchored figure navigating corruption and loyalty in Deep Cover. His performance added gravity to the film, suggesting integrity forged through suffering rather than idealism. That weight came from a childhood marked by distance and discipline. Raised in Harlem by his grandmother rather than his parents, Williams grew up surrounded by music but without domestic stability. Seeking structure, he later joined the U.S. Army as a paratrooper, leaving behind injuries and emotional strain that followed him into adulthood and informed his intense screen presence. Fame arrived with his breakout role as Link Hayes on the Mod Squad, where his cool authority made him a cultural icon. Film roles such as Prince's troubled father in Purple Rain deepened that image, revealing vulnerability beneath composure and anger beneath restraint. His marriage to actress Gloria Foster began in 1967 and ended in divorce in 1984. Yet the bond never fully broke. They remained close friends until Foster's death in 2001, adding another layer of grief to a life already shaped by separation and endurance. Clarence Williams III died on June 4, 2021, at the age of 81 from colon cancer, passing away in Los Angeles. He was laid to rest at St. Charles Cemetery in East Farmingdale, New York. With an estimated net worth of about $2 million, his legacy endures through roles that fused toughness, sorrow, and dignity. Glynn Turman as Russell Stevens, Sr. Glynn Turman was born on January 31, 1947, in New York City. At 45 years old, he played Russell Stevens, Sr., the principled but weary father whose moral compass clashes with the world consuming his son in Deep Cover. His presence grounded the film emotionally, reminding the audience what is at stake beyond the streets. That sense of quiet authority came from a childhood marked by fracture rather than safety. Turman grew up in New York with a father who was a minister, a figure associated with moral guidance, yet his parents' early divorce left lasting tension and instability at home. Seeking structure and belonging, Turman gravitated toward the stage at just 12 years old, stepping into A Raisin in the Sun and discovering that performance could replace what family life failed to provide. As his career expanded, Turman became a defining face of Black American cinema. His role as Preach in Cooley High made him a generational voice, while later work on television and film proved his range and longevity. Yet success did not insulate him from personal tragedy or loss. Turman's marriages carried both love and deep pain. After an early divorce, he married Aretha Franklin in 1978, a union steeped in fame and pressure that ended in 1984. The most devastating blow came in 1981, when his young son was stabbed to death, a trauma that reshaped Turman's life and left a grief that never fully receded. Stability eventually returned with his third marriage to Joanne Allen, which has endured since 1992. Today, Glynn Turman is 79 years old, still active as an actor, director, and mentor within the industry. With an estimated net worth of around $1.5 million, his legacy is defined less by wealth than by resilience. Roger Guenveur Smith as Eddie. Roger Guenveur Smith was born on July 27, 1955, in Berkeley, California. At 37 years old, he played Eddie, a volatile figure moving between ideology and violence in Deep Cover. His performance injected the film with unpredictability, reinforcing its themes of radicalization and moral instability. That intensity grew from a childhood shaped by contradiction rather than hardship. Raised by a father who was a judge and a mother who was a dentist, Smith lived within institutional stability while navigating the pressures of a multiracial identity in a politically charged environment. Education became his battleground, pushing him toward intellectual rigor and eventually the stage. Early collaborations and studies laid the groundwork for a career that blurred performance and activism. Smith's artistic identity crystallized through theater. His solo work, A Huey P. Newton Story, earned him an Obie Award and established him as a fearless storyteller, while collaborations with Spike Lee in films like Do the Right Thing placed him at the center of urgent cultural conversations. Unlike conventional leading men, Smith thrived in confrontation rather than comfort. His personal life reflected similar transitions. After divorcing Carolina Smith, with whom he has a daughter, he later married LaTanya Kirkland, building a larger family with 3 children. The shift from separation to stability mirrored his evolution from solitary performer to collaborative artist and father. Now, Roger Guenveur Smith is 71 years old, continuing to write, perform, and direct across stage and screen. With an estimated net worth of about $1 million, his career stands as a testament to endurance and purpose. Kamala Lopez as Belinda Chacon. Kamala Lopez was born on April 15, 1964, in New York City. At 28 years old, she played Belinda Chacon, a woman navigating power, desire, and survival on the margins of the drug world in Deep Cover. Her performance added a human counterweight to the film's violence, revealing how women absorb consequences created by male ambition. That emotional precision was shaped by cultural tension early on. Lopez spent her childhood in Caracas, Venezuela. Born to a Venezuelan father and an Indian mother, growing up between languages, traditions, and expectations that rarely aligned. When her family relocated to the United States at 14, the abrupt shift intensified her sense of displacement. Acting became a stabilizing force, first on stage and later in films like Born in East L.A. Her career expanded across film and television, but Lopez steadily moved beyond acting alone. Roles in The Burning Season and I Heart Huckabees showcased her range, while behind the camera, she found a stronger sense of authorship. Directing allowed her to shape narratives rather than simply inhabit them. Lopez's personal life has been marked more by partnership than rupture. She married Joel Marshall, building a marriage that has remained largely private and stable, a contrast to the upheaval of her early years. That stability gave her the foundation to take creative and political risks without retreat. In 2026, Kamala Lopez is 62 years old, working as a filmmaker, writer, and civil rights advocate. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, her influence extends beyond entertainment, defined by projects like Equal Means Equal, where art, activism, and lived experience converge. Julio Oscar Mechoso as Hernandez. Julio Oscar Mechoso was born on May 31, 1955, in Matanzas, Cuba. At 37 years old, he played Hernandez, a hardened figure shaped by street logic and survival, in Deep Cover. His presence reinforced the film's realism, grounding its criminal landscape in lived experience rather than caricature. That realism was rooted in the pressures of migration. Mechoso left Cuba with his family and grew up in Miami. His family ran small businesses, and the responsibility to survive economically came early. Acting emerged not as fantasy, but as another form of labor, eventually opening doors to steady character roles in projects like Jurassic Park 3. Mechoso became one of Hollywood's most reliable character actors, appearing in over 100 film and television roles. Performances in Little Miss Sunshine and crime films such as Bad Boys revealed his ability to convey authority, fatigue, and warmth within limited screen time. He rarely led stories, but he anchored them. His private life was comparatively grounded. Mechoso married Linda Ruiz, and together they raised 3 children. Family remained his constant, even as his career kept him moving between sets and cities, offering stability that the industry rarely provides. Julio Oscar Mechoso died on November 25, 2017, at the age of 62, after suffering a heart attack at his home in Burbank, California. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, his legacy lives in the sheer breadth of his work. Sidney Lassick as Guenveur. Sidney Lassick was born on July 23, 1922, in Chicago, Illinois. At 70 years old, he played Guenveur, the oily, servile fixer hovering at the edges of the drug underworld, in Deep Cover. The role amplified the film's sense of decay, showing how corruption survives not only through power, but through cowardice. That nervous energy was forged early in hardship. Lassick grew up in a working-class neighborhood as the son of Russian Jewish immigrants, in a household shaped by financial strain, cultural displacement, and the pressure to assimilate. The insecurity of immigrant life, paired with post-war uncertainty, fed the anxiety that later defined his screen persona. Acting became an outlet after his service in the U.S. Navy and studies at DePaul University, where performance allowed him to transform fear into expression. His career flourished through unforgettable character work rather than stardom. Lassick's portrayal of Charlie Cheswick in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest etched him into cinema history, while roles such as the cruel teacher in Carrie revealed his ability to channel menace beneath neurosis. Hollywood relied on him to embody society's misfits, creeps, and nervous wrecks with unsettling honesty. Sadly, Sidney Lassick died on April 12, 2003, at the age of 80, from complications related to diabetes, passing away in Los Angeles, California. He was laid to rest at Mount Sinai Memorial Park Cemetery, marked by a simple stone bearing his name and a Star of David. With an estimated net worth of around $500,000, his legacy rests not in wealth, but in indelible performances that turned vulnerability into cinematic unease. Rene Assa as Guzman. Rene Assa was born on November 15, 1944, in Cairo, Egypt. At 48 years old, he played Guzman, a peripheral yet threatening presence within the criminal network, in Deep Cover. His brief appearances strengthened the film's authenticity, suggesting a world crowded with unseen enforcers and silent risks. Assa's early life unfolded against a backdrop of cultural complexity. Growing up in Cairo, he was shaped by a multicultural environment marked by political tension and shifting identities. That early sense of displacement followed him when he later built a career in the United States, where adaptation and reinvention were constant necessities rather than choices. His acting career remained modest but steady. Assa appeared in films such as Why Me? And television series like Baywatch, often cast in roles that relied on presence rather than dialogue. He never became a marquee name, but he earned work through reliability and realism. Rene Assa died on March 10, 2002, at the age of 57, from lung cancer, passing away in Los Angeles, California. With an estimated net worth of around $500,000, his career stands as a quiet footnote in Hollywood history. Alex Colon as Molto. Alex Colon was born on January 26, 1941, in San Juan, Puerto Rico. At 51 years old, he played Molto, a volatile street-level enforcer embedded in the criminal machinery in Deep Cover. His brief but tense presence sharpened the film's sense of unpredictability, reminding viewers that danger often arrives without warning. That raw edge traced back to a life of movement and survival. Colon grew up in Puerto Rico before relocating to New York, where adaptation became a daily discipline. He found refuge in the theater scene, learning craft on stage while absorbing the grind of an industry that offered little security. Early film work like The Getaway hinted at a career built on persistence rather than privilege. His screen career unfolded in steady, supporting turns across film and television. Appearances on series such as Wonder Woman and roles in projects ranging from The Cross and The Switchblade to Harry and Tonto showed a performer trusted to ground stories in credibility. Colin never chased stardom. He chased work, and that consistency kept him employed into the 1990s. Away from the camera, Colin's life was quieter and intimate. He was married to Neva Rushell, a union that later ended in divorce, and he remained closely connected to his family, including his daughter and sister. The real battle arrived through illness, a prolonged fight that gradually drained his strength and curtailed his work. Sadly, Alex Colin died on January 6, 1995, at the age of 53, after a long illness caused by viral hepatitis in Los Angeles, California. With an estimated net worth of around $300,000, his legacy rests in a career defined by endurance. Sandra Gould as Mrs. G. Sandra Gould was born on July 23, 1916, in Brooklyn, New York. At 76 years old, she played Mrs. G, a fleeting yet memorable presence, in Deep Cover. Though small, the role marked one of her final screen appearances, adding a touch of old-school television authority to a modern crime story. Her comfort before microphones began early. Growing up in Brooklyn, Gould entered radio at the age of 9, learning timing and voice long before cameras became central to her craft. That early start instilled discipline and adaptability, qualities that carried her through decades of shifting entertainment formats and kept her working while others faded. Gould's career peaked in television history. She became iconic as Gladys Kravitz on Bewitched, transforming the role into a fan favorite through exaggerated suspicion and sharp comedic rhythm. Film appearances like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken reinforced her gift for scene-stealing character work. Her personal life held both partnership and loss. Gould married Hollingsworth Morse, a director, in a marriage that ended in divorce, and later wed Larry Burns, a radio executive who died in 1995. Together they had a son, Michael Burns, who became her emotional anchor as health concerns emerged later in life. Sandra Gould died on July 20, 1999, at the age of 82, after suffering a stroke following heart surgery in Burbank, California. She was cremated, with her ashes returned to her son. With an estimated net worth of around $1 million, her legacy endures through a voice, a character, and a generation of television viewers who never forgot Gladys watching from the window. More than 3 decades later, the cast of Deep Cover, 1992, tells a story far darker and more human than the film itself. Some are still working, some left quietly, and others are now only memories etched into cinema history. So, when you look at Deep Cover, then and now, 2026, what hits harder? The roles they played or the lives they lived after the cameras stopped rolling? If you want more untold cast stories, forgotten careers, and the real price of Hollywood fame, like the video, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for the next chapter.